everyone. I'm Gwen. I'm sitting here in the NSS offices. You can see the library behind me here. And we're properly socially distancing from Mark down in the Complete Sculptor. It's about a mile away. And as you know, we're hosting a series of programs called NSS Connections. So today we're visiting the Complete Sculptor in Manhattan. And the facility has been closed to the public for the past year. So although they never stopped working for a second, they have a strong online presence. So for the first time in several months, the owner, Mark Fields, is opening his doors to us virtually. So everyone in attendance is on mute, but we do encourage you to ask questions. You can do that through the chat room, or you can raise your hand. And we will try to address all of your questions. And with that said, why don't we just get started? I will spotlight Mark and he'll take over.
Hey everybody, for the beginning of this, I won't be able to see you since I'm on a mobile camera, so I can't see the gallery. So I'm just going to assume that everybody that knows me has already logged in, and anybody who doesn't know me, hi, how are you? My name is Mark. I own the Complete Sculptor. We opened in 1995, and this is and have yet to shut our doors for work, although given the times that we're in right now, obviously the store is not open for walk-ins. We're trying to keep a safe environment, and we went from a staff of 25 down to a staff of 5, so it's been a little bit trying. One of the ideas was to expose you to the shop. And if you've been here before, this will just be like a homecoming. And if you haven't been here, hopefully this will sort of translate into what kind of a place we are. Because when you're looking at the online store, you might as well be anywhere. And when you can put a name and a place and sort of an environment to the shop, it changes the life, just like the lives that you guys live in your studios. And if you go to your house, unless your house is your studio, typically it's not the same environment. I am going to say that right from the beginning, this is supposed to be an interactive event. I'm going to be talking for the next 2 hours, which is just, awesome for me because I love to do that. But we may trade off the cameras and we're going to switch perspectives. But if you have questions about things as we're going, please interact with me because it helps me feel like I'm not actually alone in the world as we do these days. So my daughter is actually holding the video camera at the moment that we're filming on, and so she's going to be walking backwards sometimes, so we'll try not to make you too dizzy. The Complete Sculptor was started in 1995, and we sort of came into being because there wasn't really a one-stop shop for sculptors. Sculptors are typically, very difficult to take care of. And I know all of you are saying, no, you're all easy people to deal with. But the truth is that sculptors are very, very particular about what they like. So having that kind of a support system and, hello? Was there somebody there? Did I miss a question? Okay, can you hear me? Everybody's good? So we delved into all of the different media, from wood to stone to clay, plastics, metal, basically anything you could think of that was three-dimensional. Now, lately, we've been doing a lot of culinary arts and all kinds of different things that are about sculpture. One of the things was that we started off with very classical sculpture materials and classical sculptors, and then I realized that as much as many of the sculptors out there don't actually make their living from their own sculpture. Hopefully they're in some sort of creative environment or industry that utilizes those same set of skills. And then we branched out into all of those different industries. So as we start today, we're going to do a walk through the store. And the store is sort of categorized into different media. So we're going to start over with clay over here. And I'm going to walk backwards. If I trip and fall, many of you do know, but I am now 2 months out of spinal surgery. And I can lift my hands, which is very good. But I apologize in advance if I'm a little bit spotty. So as we go through, this is sort of the clay area. There's the tool wall, which you may want to get in a close-up over there. which gives you the opportunity to sort of see the wide variety of tools that are out there that we keep in stock. You know, many of the problems with a lot of these places is that they don't actually have the ability to ship, and we tend to do that very quickly. She's giving you all the toys. And then as we go into to the left here, you'll see that we carry all the different glazes for ceramic sculpture. And then on the back wall over here, you'll see a wide variety of different plastilines, as well as water-based clays and waxes. So this is all the sculpture media that's sort of here. And one of the things I'm going to do is briefly describe the differences. I know many of you are experts in a lot of these materials, so the idea of walking through is kind of cool, but just to have a brief understanding of what those materials are. So water-based clay is the original clay, and it was actually, it's made in the ground. It's actually clay, and those are typically wet when you use them. They're very, very soft. So one of the features of a water-based clay is that you can really squeeze it and put your hands in it, and it's very malleable. This particular one that we're gonna open up here is it's a black porcelain clay. But you can see how easily it comes off, right? So you can build directly. This was a piece that we made with it just a little while ago. That's courtesy of Eileen Fields. She does the dragons. But that's what it's like when it's air dried. When it's wet, you can really see how easily it melds to itself so that you can create forms, build up over an armature if you're not going to fire it. But if you're going to fire it, then you would build it up directly. So you want a clay that has a nice body and allows you to build up large sections without sagging. So these particular clays are a new line that we're bringing in, but they have a little bit of grog in them, so they really hold up well. Plastilines, or oil-based clays, are your other type of media, which are wax-based. They're much firmer, and even the soft ones really start off firm at room temperature, but they're very dependent on ambient temperature. So the warmer it is, the softer it gets. Even the warmth of your hands will allow you to make it more malleable and sculptable. The advantage to these materials is that they don't dry. So you can make a maquette and you can work on it, or a sculpture, and you can work on it for days, weeks, months, theoretically years, without too much change in the media itself. But it will also allow you, and again, there are soft ones, medium ones, firm ones. There are a lot of different characteristics that are involved with the clays. This is a piece that we made in an armature that's in a medium. So this is just a brief study of a female figure. And then in that same family, there are also polymer clays. And actually, polymer clays used to be considered just a kid's material. But what's happened is, with the creation of some more advanced versions of it, and obviously in larger sizes, there are new polymer clays that are actually used for finished products for sculpture, also for jewelry applications. And those are clays that stay malleable until you bake them in the oven. So it's a low temperature. These are some of the brands. So Sculpey, Super Sculpey, all these different kinds of materials that are available to you. The other thing that sort of falls into the same family is going to crisscross, because there are sculpting waxes and then there are casting waxes. Now, wax can be used as a finished product. A lot of times, if you think about an everyday item that's a finished product in wax, that would be a candle, right? But you can sculpt directly in beeswax and paraffin mix, and that would be a finished product if you wanted it to be. Beeswax makes it smell nicer also. But with regard to casting, you can sculpt directly in wax and then take that directly to metal in the lost wax process. And those would be microcrystalline waxes. And they come from very soft, which would be something like this, which the wax itself, I don't know if you can see how close that is, but the material is very malleable at room temperature, right? And they come in different colors. So this is a sculpting wax. And the real difference between a sculpting wax and a casting wax is the malleability at room temperature. So it's the hardness of the material. A casting wax is going to be significantly firmer and designed to be melted and put into a mold. But you can see that it's not really sculptable it's sort of brittle. But that hardness allows you to cast it into the mold and then take it out of the mold and do all the kinds of finishing that you need to do after that. Were there any questions about those kinds of materials? I don't hear anybody, so I'm assuming that everybody got that. There's going to be a quiz later, so I want you guys to ask all the questions you want to go as we go. All right. So as we start to tour around the store, the way that this works is we've got those types of materials in this area. We come into what are called thermoplastics and textile hardeners. So for the textile artists, we have something called PowerTex. It's basically like Elmer's glue on steroids. These are PVAs. And what happens is that the material will go into a natural fiber, create a hard finished product, right? And so this is very durable. That particular one is made out of a t-shirt. So is that square that's up there. And this is just tissue paper. So you can use it on all different kinds of materials. And then it becomes a very firm finished product. Textile arts have actually become very popular recently because a lot of people are working at home and these materials are all non-toxic. The thermoplastics similarly are capable of being melted and actually formed into a variety of different shapes. So they come as beads, right? These are thermoplastics. And when you put them in hot water, they become malleable so that you can sculpt them directly. Here's one piece. These are just some different things. This is my saggy turkey. I don't know if you can still see the turkey there, but this one was sculpted. You can also press it into a mold and then use it as a finished product like that. So these were just heated up and pressed into a silicone mold. This section over here is all the adhesives. This is, the sticky section, and we have adhesives for everything. One of the benefits of the company is really that you can call us and under any circumstances describe what it is you need to do, and we try to find the materials that best suit that application. Everything is contextual, so job to job to job, everything changes. All right. As we turn around behind you here, hang on. As I'm lifting the things I'm not supposed to lift. But we also cater to gilders. So these are all gilding supplies. You'll look at the foot of the gilding section, and there's actually some raw aluminum. Yeah. So those are aluminum bars for casting. We deal with low temperature metals, higher temperature metals, bronze, aluminum. And that's all different gilding supplies. On the top, we have some examples of pieces that we've gilded. So you can gild pretty much any surface, which is kind of nice. There are a variety of different applications. There's water gilding for porous surfaces and oil gilding for non-porous surfaces. So if you want to gild on resin, there's oil gilding. So these are actually cast on some different plasters and on resin. And this is actually a bronze gilding on marble. That's on stone, right? So that's gilding on stone. But there are no materials that you can't gild on, which is kind of interesting. So it allows you to put a silver or gold or copper metallic finish on things. And they do make faux metals as well as real ones. Then actually, we're going to switch gears again. I'm going to skip this one section for right now, and we're going to come around here. So in this area, and again, I apologize ahead of time because this last 9-10 months, we have basically shifted from a pretty shopping store into a warehouse, right? So there are boxes everywhere, and we took this opportunity to clean a little bit, which we moved a lot of stuff out of the way. So it actually doesn't even look this clean normally, but there's still going to be some stuff around. So I'm gonna apologize ahead of time. But over here we have a variety of different wood chisels and all different kinds of woodworking tools. And maybe in that case, and we bring in tools from all over the world. So, excuse me, we actually have Italian carving tools, domestic, Japanese, Russian, and we find expert tool makers all over the world and capitalize on them to help bring those to you. Then in this section over here, you've got more woodworking tools as well, and a variety of different rasps and things like that. Along this back wall, you're going to have hammers and stone. You start to get into the stone carving area. So this is our wall of hammers, all the dangerous tools. Right. I try to keep the kids away from this because they get mad at me these days. But I've survived this far, so I'm assuming I'm going to make it through. We'll see you all on the other side. Then we get into the sort of the rasps and files. Now, what's interesting about these is that, you know, we import a lot of materials from Italy. So a lot of these tools are handmade in Satsema or Provenzano, which is right by Pietrasanta. There's a company called Milani, and we have managed to continue to work with them even through this. So
Mark,
we've been getting shipments in. Yes.
may I interrupt? We have a question.
Sure.
Actually from another Mark. I'm going to spotlight him so he can ask himself.
Sure.
I can.
We're going to go around to the right. I'll just go to those cases.
Where did he go?
Well, he can talk.
Well, actually, Mark, I'm sorry, Mark Schneider, if you just unmute yourself.
Yeah, can you hear me?
Yes, I can.
Okay, great. A general question.
Yeah.
As you go from category to category, does Complete Sculptor, do you manufacture or commission the manufacture of any custom stuff that's unique to you, or are you primarily sourcing your materials in these various departments from other places?
Well, it's a combination of those two things, actually. So I try very hard not to reinvent the wheel. If somebody makes something well, my inclination is to support them so that I can continue to keep the people that are in business as well. So I try not to generate competition against my sources, but there are things that are frequently specialized or not made, and we've designed a variety of different tools, especially for certain instructors. I don't know if any of you are familiar with Judy Fox, but she has a line of clay tools, and we have built them for her. We create them. So I do custom work, and we utilize our existing manufacturers to make those, but they are our line, so they're not sold anywhere else.
Thanks.
And that would be yeah. I'm sorry, I didn't hear that. Say that again.
Oh, I was just going to add, it would be interesting as you go through category by category, if you would highlight some of the stuff that is unique. I'd be curious. Sure.
So, I mean, for the stone carving tools, I mean, to be honest, you know, there is a very wide variety of things that are made. But for instance, on your left over here, there's a particular carbide bush hammer. So that one is made for us by Trow and Holden, right? The original design for the round-headed hammers, which were the mallets, which are these up here. So these are made by Trow and Holden, and I actually designed these so that the shape was right. So we did the R&D with them. Now they produce them and they sell them and we sell them, but that is a design that I actually created with them. You know, a lot of the other mallets for wood have barrels in them, and for stone you really want a nice flat surface so that you don't slip when you strike it. So some of these types of things are adjustments that we've made to existing stuff. Now, stone carving has been around for a long time, so they've had a lot of years to really manipulate and to refine the process. And when you look at the wide variety of tools that exist, but I'll give you another example. I'll grab one now. You can just look in the cases for a moment, and I'll just stay over there. Sorry. So this is a tool that we make, but again, this is a tool that I have made in Italy for us. So this is a stone carving gouge. One of the things that I've found is that when people are carving stone versus wood, the variety of tools that work similarly are not really there. So stone carving gouges were never available. So we started having them made in Italy for us. So I have pneumatic ones and hand ones, but this is a fairly large, nice berth, and this will work well on marble, on limestone, on alabaster.
Is it still on?
Oh, I don't know. Am I highlighted, Gwen? Oh, there we go.
Yeah.
Sorry.
Yes,
Okay.
yeah, you
Okay.
both were.
Ah, okay, no problem. I just on the little machine, you know, we're navigating the technological side of all of this is more complicated than the sculpting part. So, but this is a gouge that we designed and built and had made in Italy. So they make them for us. Again, I'm not a blacksmith, so I have done it, and I'll tell you right off the bat, it is not an easy thing to master. So we utilize the blacksmiths that I know in order to make these kinds of tools. The same thing applies for our stainless steel tools. So I have a stainless steel producer, and I'll show you some of those tools that we've designed. So I'll pull out some of those as well. But the answer is that over the years, I have responded to what people request and tried to create those items to be available. I hope that helps answer the question.
Yeah, thank you.
Sure. So we've talked about sort of wood carving chisels and stone carving chisels and rasps. And one of the things about the uniqueness of the place that exists here is the wide berth of actual raw materials that we talk about, right? So we actually have hundreds of tons of soapstone and alabaster and marble and things like that. So as she pans out now, you'll see pallets of, so this particular one, this is raw jade on the end here, these blocks. And there, I should grab a water bottle. Yeah, we're gonna just do a quick walk and grab a water bottle for you. So what's interesting about stone is it's actually like most other things, right? So a smooth surface yields both color and clarity, whereas a rough surface is textured, right? Which makes something matte or flatter. This applies to resin, to wood, to stone. So when you wet a stone that is actually saw cut or rough, you see the color come out. So these blocks are raw jade, which is kind of interesting. And when you have a polished surface, like on this granite piece, you'll see that you can see this differential. So this is the color here when it's clear and it's polished, and this is the color when it's rough. So as we walk around with people, and we do now, interestingly enough, we've been doing a lot of video calls for people to purchase stone because people would wander in to grab what they wanted, but now it's much more difficult. This particular stone is actually a very interesting stone. So this is one of the few national carving stones. This is called Minnesota pipestone. It is found in Minnesota on Indian reservations, and it is the stone that they used for making peace pipes because it actually has a very high temperature threshold. So it allows you to smoke in it without degrading the stone as you're using it. The peace pipes actually have to be given away. So this is a stone that has a sort of a mystical background to it. The other things that you're looking at here are soapstone, alabaster, and we're going to walk into the section here, and you'll be able to see sort of how much stone. This is just in the New York location. We also have a warehouse where we stock, many, many more pallets. But these are all different kinds of stones. So you're looking at soapstone now. Behind you, there's something called translucent orange alabaster, and this stone actually glows. But again, when you wet it, you can see the color come out. All right. But these are transparent. This is actually transparent alabaster from Italy. And I'll show you something interesting here. Right. So if we put on a flashlight, I don't know, can you see that? So before there was plastic, right, there was white alabaster. They used to make lighting fixtures, sconces. I mean, they still do, but now the plastic ones are much less expensive. But this is the stone that lighting manufacturers would use to carve the actual sconces and different kinds of lighting fixtures that were out there, because the light would penetrate through in a very soft glow. It's translucent. So the translucent white, and these are still used by high-end lighting manufacturers now, but this is the same kind of stone here. On this side, we've got more marbles and limestone. This is a stone called onyx, again, very translucent, but you can see some of the sizes we have are fairly large. I forgot to clean that one first.
Mark,
Yes.
Sorry, this is Gwen, sorry. We have another question. Donna would like to know what stone you would recommend for a new carver.
First of all, we could get you into a piece of, how about that big piece of marble right there?
Donna, shall I put you on screen?
So this piece, I don't know if you can see the scale of this particular piece, but this is a great piece to start on. I'm kidding. It's a little bit big. Okay.
Donna, you know what? Donna is phoning in, so she doesn't have video, so I'm not going to spotlight her. I can't.
Okay.
But Donna, if you want to unmute yourself, you can ask. Mark will answer your question regardless.
Okay. Or I can just answer it. It's no problem.
Thank you.
Okay. So starting stones typically will be less hard than obviously more advanced ones, but it's also about what you have available, right? You may have something in your backyard that you want to start with. That's going to be the least expensive option because you can go outside, pick it up and bring it in. Now those may be tool breakers because they're so hard, and that may be a frustrating experience. Most people start with alabaster or limestone. Those are the two sort of medium stones. A little bit softer than that would be soapstone. A little bit firmer than that would be marbles. And then with the marble, it's primarily white marble, and the Italian white marble is the primo stuff. Has a much smaller crystal, so it carves beautifully. But you can really start with pretty much anything. It's just about what tools you have available and where you want to do it, and also what scale, right? Because if you're going to carve really large, soapstone doesn't really stay together in very, very large pieces. A lot of times the soapstone's smaller. Alabaster is also a found stone, so there are only certain colors that you can get pretty big. The translucent white, when it comes in, the biggest ones are about, I don't know, 500 or 600 kilos. So that's roughly 1,400 pounds, but they're not huge. They come in like big potatoes. The domestic alabaster, some of that is available in larger sizes. I'm sorry, what? Yeah. Okay. So how low are we? Okay. Sorry, we're experiencing charging requirements. Don't trip there. So some of the more difficult stones, like onyx or calcite, are going to be harder. They're beautiful. Even the pipestone is a little bit more complicated, just because it's brittle. So typically with the pipestone, you actually will rasp it rather than carve it, because it's got layers like a shale. So what happens is that when you're carving it, you can break it apart a little bit more easily. So typically people will cut it with a saw and then rasp it. But it's that beautiful terracotta color. Then you can get into semi-precious stuff like fluorite. This piece that's over here is the green. This is a gorgeous piece of this stuff. And if you look at the other side of it, it looks like it's from another planet. It just has these bubbles that are crystal structures. But this stuff is very, very hard. So again, I would start with alabaster, and it comes in a lot of different colors, or soapstone or limestone. Limestone's nice because there's no grain to it whatsoever. It's just it's a solid stone. And then right now you're also getting a quick view of the wood section, where we have a lot of different burls and things like that. Now I stock dimensional pieces, but we don't stock slabs really. So lumber would be from a different place, but we have logs and we have kiln dried, you know, pieces like that, and a lot of blocks. The blocks are going to be on the other side. So this entire section that you're looking at now is all alabaster. And then one of the things about all of these things is sort of how the tools work in them. So as you're preparing to do the work that you want to do, you want to make sure that the stone is going to hold the detail level that you want, as well as you have the tools available to work on it. Let me just grab something here and you can just give them a view of the stone better, and I'll be right back. So I'm going to just show you some quick rasping on some different pieces so that you can get an idea of how the different softnesses or hardnesses affect what you're working on. And then, you know, the level of finishing that you're doing is also important. You know, a lot of times people who work in very hard stones do pieces that are less detailed because the finishing is much more difficult. So Morgan, if you want to come over here. And right now she's showing you the blocked wood. As she turns around, you're going to get a brief look at my office. I am not a science fiction fan, just in case you hadn't noticed. And you'll look in here, again, we work in a lot of different industries. So from fine sculpture to special effects, to movies, to models, to culinary, to, you know, architectural applications. I do accept any artwork as gifts. If you guys are ever interested, you end up in my museum. This is a little bit of my mess. This is a lot like the inside of my head. And there's Han Solo and carbonite. So I'm going to bring you back out here for a minute. We can come back to this part later. Briefly, what I'm going to show you is just some different stones. So this particular one is a soapstone, and what I can show you is that even with just a razor blade, you can carve the surface of this. All right. And with a little bit of water, you can see the color of the stone there. You can see that this part is much smoother. Right? And if you were to go at it with a rasp, you can see how quickly you remove stone. Right? So soapstone is the softest. Alabaster is going to be something that's in between. Again, you can hear the difference in the stone, so that's a little bit harder. That's an alabaster. This is limestone. Now, if you just put it on mute for a second. So if you actually continue to carve and, you know, just keep working with a rasp and working with a rasp and working with a rasp, then eventually you can start to get a little bit of a face. That wasn't movie magic at all. Marble, white marble, again. Now you'll see this one actually feels softer than the limestone, and sometimes the marbles are. This is Statuario Porto Bianco. It comes from the Cava de Michelangelo. And this particular one, if you've ever been on that road, it's actually really, really hairy in terms of what it looks like. But as you're rasping this one, you can also magically, no, up here, you can magically create a face. I had to do some prep work for this. You guys are, you know, you're a rough crowd. I can't hear if anybody's laughing, so I don't know. And then black marble is actually one of the hardest stones, and it actually reads up towards granite. This is a particular stone. This is called Portoro. It's a black and gold marble that comes out of Italy, and it's renowned for many people's bathrooms, especially in the Saudi world. They love this stone. So this mine has actually been mined out and is closed. So there are some blocks floating around, but they become very expensive because you can't get it anymore. The other stone that's here is this is a granite, and this is a granite that actually has fossils in it. We call it fossil stone. Super pretty, but the parts where the fossils are is much softer than the parts of the stone that are around it. So it's a hard stone to carve, but really interesting. I don't think it lends itself to figurative work because the fossils make it too busy, but we can certainly do that. Then I wanted to show you briefly just the contrast between two different types of wood that I have over here. Just to give you an example. So, because the density of a material also determines the hardness mostly. So there are some stones that are very, very dense, and heavy, but that are soft. So it's like the duck-billed platypus. There's all kinds of things out there that shouldn't exist, but they do. So I brought over two pieces of wood just to show you. So basswood is a clear wood. It's what's called a clear wood. It's like a light blonde color. No real appreciable graining, very easy to carve. This is a great beginner wood. But this piece, right, which is a 6x6x4, weighs about around a little over a pound. Okay, and then contrastly, then you've got all different kinds of things in between there, like the fruit and nut woods. So the fruit and nut woods are all pretty much middle ground, walnut, cherry, things like that. Then you get into the rosewoods, which are even harder and heavier. And then you get into this wood. This is ebony. This block weighs the same as that block, right? So it's amazing. This is one of the few woods that doesn't float. So ebony is actually heavier and more dense and will actually sink if it doesn't have an air cavity for displacement. Questions about raw materials? Huh? Yeah. So we're going to, and this is one of our armature building stations, just so you can see. So I'm going to switch cameras, but that's a place. So we build all of the armatures here. When you get a chance, I'm going to switch to wide once we get in there, and then we're gonna do a couple other things. So just to give you, I'm going to have to do more in terms of floating around with the store. I'll show you some more different areas, but we're going to charge this particular camera for a minute, and then we're going to come into the classroom right now, so I can do that. All right, that's for you. All right, so Gwen, if you can change me to wide.
Also, Mark, we have two questions. One, where does the ebony wood come from?
Okay, can you switch me to wide first?
Yes.
Okay. Is that me? No, walking is gone. Did you lose me?
Nope, sorry.
She still spelled it on that.
That's okay. Yeah, that's right.
Okay, there you go.
Okay. All right. So, ebony actually comes from a couple different places, and most of it comes from Africa. So there's Gaboon ebony, which is the dark black. In South America, there's an ebony, but it's a little bit more brown. It's not as that rich ebony color. Still beautiful, still heavy. But the ebony that they use, and it's ebony and ivory, right? That's the piano keys. So that's actually ebony. And what we actually, in 1996, I bought a bunch of ebony from somebody who had stopped carving it because it was too hard. And we ended up having Steinway as our customer for many years. And they still buy pieces from us to make pianos. Because the stuff was cut and farmed prior to the new regulations. And unfortunately now, ebony, it grows so slowly that most people, you think pieces that are 2 inches thick, and it's big. But we have logs that are about 8 inches in diameter they're called billets. And it's pretty interesting that it's hard to find now. So what was the second question?
And the second question is from Paul Foley, and he would like to know if you can carve petrified wood?
Sure. So petrified wood is technically stone now, right? So you wouldn't use wood carving chisels. You're going to ruin all your wood carving chisels on that. But if you treat it like stone, it's absolutely carvable. So you can do now. Petrified wood is very striated, so it's typically all in one direction when you're looking at it. It's actually the wood grain that's been impregnated with stone. So it's fossilized stone, fossilized wood, basically. So you can use abrasives to grind it. If you want to carve it, I recommend carving against the grain when you're doing it, and you want to use carbide tip tools. So diamond rasps, carbide chisels. And that's really the way to carve that. But sure, you're never really going to get high polish on it. It has a lot of grain to it, so the surface doesn't lend itself to it. But if you want a high polish on it, you can wax it and then buff the wax.
Thank you.
Sure. So basically, I'm in one of our classrooms, which is now, I don't want to cover my logo, which has now been converted into a little bit of a warehouse space because we don't have any people in the shop. And actually, you guys are the most number of people I've had in the shop since March. So welcome and thank you. It's nice to actually see. Now I'm looking at a screen where I can see a bunch of you on the screen now, and it's awesome. Before I was running my soliloquy and I didn't really know if any of you were there. So now at least I can see some of you possibly laughing. And at this point I get to tell my first joke, right? I mean, the best sculptor joke I have heard, although it's not really a joke, it's kind of sad. Maybe I shouldn't tell it. How do you become a sculptor with $1 million? Start with 2. You have to start with $2 million because selling everything, buying everything from me is expensive. And honestly, selling sculpture is not the easiest thing anymore. I still think that you know, I got into this business because my mother's a sculptor. And I actually started moving her sculpture in the beginning, and that was how I got sort of exposed to the industry. And I begged her for years and years and years to just paint in watercolors because it was just too damn heavy. And now we've ended up with sculpture all over the place, and this is where I am. But what's really interesting about it is that I look at the world differently. You know, I am not a sculptor. Okay, I can sculpt. I teach sculpture. I am not a sculptor. To me, a sculptor is somebody who can't live without doing it. They breathe, they eat. We're all adults here. They screw, they sculpt. It's what feeds their soul, right? It allows them to actually be who they are. For me, I'm a problem solver. I'm an enabler. I love to actually take the issues and figure out ways around them. Like you said, you know, designing my own tools or figuring out how to get somebody from point A to point B. That's what I love. I love the puzzle. So it tended to be a good fit. And I ended up doing a lot of stuff in her studio before I started this business. And as we've started to go into all the different media, now I end up teaching her, which is awesome because it takes stuff out of my account in terms of the stuff I owe her for having given birth to me. She keeps reminding me that that's the case. So all of that said, I'm going to go into a little bit of mold making now while we're charging the iPad so we can wander around again. And the mold making part of sculpture is really important. You know, one of the aspects of making work and having it be an original is also the opportunity to recreate it in multiple different media, or sometimes making something that's fragile or degradable and then having it become something permanent, right? When I speak about that, mostly I'm talking about the lost wax casting. I mean, that's the most obvious, right? You make something in clay and you turn it into bronze. It's like magic, right? So there's a mid step in there where you make a mold, and that mold is made off of your original, and then you cast it in wax, and then you take that wax and you burn that out and you create bronze or glass. Both of them are done in the same process. So that's one example of taking one medium and turning it into something else. By the same token, you can make multiples that way. So all of a sudden, what mold making does is provide you with the opportunity to sell a piece or promote a piece more than once, which is kind of an awesome thing to do, because then your heart, especially for people that are doing working in materials that are singular in nature, like stone carving or wood carving, it's not like you can just make another one exactly the same, although the masters do, but that's 10,000 hours in, right? So mold making provides you with that possibility. It allows you to take any shape or form and reproduce it. So the process becomes very important. And when you think about mold making, I think some people get confounded because the process it seems very confusing and difficult. And I'm going to tell you right off the bat, we prior to COVID, obviously, we used to teach mold making classes. And one of the things about teaching a mold making class is that people come out of that either understanding how to make a mold and being able to do it themselves, or they come out of it and they understand exactly why they have to pay somebody so much money to do it because they hate it. Okay, mold making is a whole nother set of skills. It's like fixing your own car. So if you're a sculptor, don't necessarily need to be a good mold maker. You can hire one, just like you would hire a foundry. But if you're industrious and want to make your own molds and also even make your own foundry in your backyard, you can. There's no limitations here other than the first $1 million you have to spend and your own comfort in the abilities. You should find what works for you and then explore that and keep that going. I mean, that's really the important part. Questions at this point before I jump into it?
Actually, Mark, yeah, Peter from Kenya actually has a question. And Peter, if you want to unmute yourself, you can ask directly, or I'm happy to ask for you. So Peter is wondering if it's possible to harden soapstone by heating it, and how many colors of soapstone approximately do you have in the shop? We're popping back to the stone section.
Sure, and that's no problem. And basically what I want you to feel like is you're in the room and we're doing a tour. I want you to interact. I want you to ask questions. I want you I'm here every day. This is all old hat for me. So I want you to feel like you can do that.
I'm popping Peter onto the screen, Peter. I hope you don't mind. We can all
Peter,
see you.
how are you? So the answer is I have 11 colors of soapstone. The problem with cooking soapstone, it does make it harder and a little bit more brittle, but it will also fade the colors. So a lot of times what happens is it changes the color scheme on it. It's one of the reasons that there's and if you're in Kenya, you have Wonderstone there. And Wonderstone it's a black stone, but when you cook it, it turns white. It's a silica-based stone, and it's like a ceramic. So what happens is, like firing clay, sometimes when you fire stone, you change the color. All right. So a lot of the soapstones are going to change color. They mute their colors quite a bit. You lose a lot of color. They turn much more white, and they lose all of their definition because the minerals that are in them. Again, this depends on the temperature that you're actually doing it at, but the heat can remove some of the coloration, so they're not as brilliant. And with alabaster, the same thing happens. If you cook alabaster, because alabaster has a lot of moisture in it, it primarily turns white opaque, and then it actually it becomes harder, but it's more brittle. So it's harder to touch, it's harder to scratch, but if you drop it, it shatters. Does that make sense?
Yeah, that makes sense.
Okay. Thank you. Good question. I saw one go by about glass casting. So glass casting can be done a number of different ways. You can actually do glass casting exactly the same way that you do bronze casting. So you start off with a wax original, then you make a refractory mold on that. A refractory is just a high temperature mold that allows you to pour the glass into it, and it holds the heat. So you take an original wax, you make the new mold, you melt out the wax. That's why you burn out the wax, right? That's why it's called lost wax. And then you can pour glass into that. Now, there are certain glasses that you can do that with. There's something called a COE, which is the coefficient of expansion. And that's how you choose the glass you would do casting with in a closed mold. And I apologize because, and I want you to please, if I use terminology that you don't recognize, tell me, because over the last 25 years, I've somehow become familiar with all these things, and it's all stuck in my head, but it's organized a little bit erratically. So,
so Charlotte, I just popped you up on the screen since you asked that question. If you want to unmute
Charlotte.
yourself, you can.
Thank you.
Thank you.
So yeah, feel free to interact with me. So so you can do lost wax glass casting. Then there's also something called slumping, which is where you have a positive mold, right? So instead of a negative mold, you have a positive mold, or you could have a negative also, but they're typically very shallow. And then you take the glass and you lay it over it and you put it into a kiln. And what happens is the heat makes it sag, but you're not liquefying the glass. You're just letting it sag and then you pop it out. And then the cooling process allows you to do that. So for much more subtle casting, that's appropriate too. And it doesn't require the same process. Like you don't need the kiln that you would use for melting out the wax. Like you have to have two separate setups to do lost wax. But for sagging, you just need the one furnace.
Okay, thank you.
Sure. So, and it's just dependent on, like, if you're trying to do something that's three-dimensional and has forms, then the lost wax process is going to be much better for you. But if you just have sort of a low relief or a shallow casting, then slumping would work fine too.
Okay.
And then just one last thing on that. So a lot of times when you do glass casting, there are two different ways to do it. The DIY way to do it would be to make the mold, right? And then you can put something called frit in it. Frit is tiny, tiny little pieces of glass, and then you can heat that, and with, obviously, I don't use my hands, but you can use gloves and rotate this hot mold, and you can get a hollow glass casting that way. So because the frit melts much more quickly because it's tight, smaller pieces.
I do the bronze casting all the time, but I just had not even thought about doing glass casting.
Sure. Well, and again, the process is very similar. The only real difference is that you have to be much more careful about letting the molds cool. So with bronze, the final product, the bronze, is much more resilient than the glass in terms of shrinkage and malleability. So when the bronze shrinks a little bit, and even if you let bronze shrink too fast, cool too fast, it'll shrink, you'll get stress cracks, right? But with glass, it shatters. So when you're taking that end product down from having poured the glass into it, those molds can take 5 or 6 days in an oven or kiln to cool at a much slower temperature, so that you don't ruin the glass in terms of that. But other than that, the beginning process is basically identical.
Thank you.
Sure. So, and in life, you may see so that piece in the back, this piece in the back here, these were replicas that we made for the Met. So this is done in a faux stone, right? And made off of the original antiquity. And one of the things about the mold making process is that a lot of times I get calls from people that are working in very sensitive environments, if you will. Between a lot of the museums and I've done work at the Vatican where we have to go in and actually make molds off of things that are basically hundreds and hundreds of years old and can't get damaged. There's no way to leave traces. So a lot of times I consult on these jobs and they're much more complicated than you might think. But the end product and the process is basically the same. So as you're starting to do any job, when it comes to mold making, basically you have a starting point, which is your original, and then you have your ending point, which is whatever you want to cast in, right? And then hopefully it's one straight line between those 2 points, but a lot of times it's this zigzag thing, and then you have to get to the end product. And even as we've been talking about lost wax and bronze is an example of that, right? So unless you are working in wax directly, that you can't get to the bronze, you make the mold in between. If you're working in something else that doesn't burn out, then you have to make a mold, cast a wax, make a mold, cast the bronze. So it's just about multi-step processes that you have to accommodate. And when it comes to mold making, one of the things that you're most afraid of is getting the piece stuck in the mold, right? So figurative pieces are the most complicated in that regard, both two-legged and four-legged creatures, right? Because it gets to be much more complicated. How do you get that mold apart? If you can make a mold off of something that's very simple. So if you have a figurative head, this particular one, or the piece we were looking at before, and Gwen, in the next couple of minutes, I'm going to go back and forth between the close-up and the wide. So if you want to find the close-up. So this particular piece, when you're looking at a piece like this, right, the easy way to make a mold off of this is to understand how you would have to get it out. So where are the problem areas? The neck, the base, right? Because these are smaller than the shoulders, right? The neck is smaller than the head. Well, most necks are smaller than heads. I guess it depends on which part of the country you come from. That was a joke. You guys can laugh. I am here on Saturday night to entertain you. And by the way, thank you for wasting a Saturday night with me. But, you have to at least humor the jokes, the bad jokes. So when you think about taking this piece out of a mold, if it were embedded in a block of rubber, there's no way to get it out, right? It would get stuck because the shoulders are wider. So when you look at a piece like this, I'll turn it this way, you think about it, and how would I get it out? Well, the easiest way is a two-part mold, a left and a right, in this case, a front and a back, right? Now, every piece is different, so how you determine where those parting lines are makes a difference in each one. But for something like this, it makes sense that you can take a piece off this way and a piece off this way, right? And then frequently, if you look at castings, and Gwen, if you want to shift to the close-up,
Is that the Mark Fields walking?
No, the other one.
Okay.
So when I was waiting for things, I used to say that we would play the Double Jeopardy music, but now it's so sad because Alex is gone. So I try not to make that reference. Although I just did, so I blew it. But when you're looking at a piece that's been made, somebody else's piece, your piece, you can typically see that in the places where the parting line is, there's a seam.
Just replace the spotlight.
Yep, awesome. So can you see that seam line there? You see that? Does that show? Right there. So that's the parting line where the two pieces of the mold came together. Now, there was some flashing there, so we can go back to wide for a minute. Just replace the spotlight. Nope, not walking. The wide. The walking isn't walking. I can do a little dance.
Hello.
We're here. We're just.
Sorry, we're still here. We've got five
This way.
for the rest of you.
Mommy's over there.
We're having some technical difficulties.
Oh.
Sculptors should be
nice.
used to technical difficulties. All right, hold on one second. Do you want me to go get the walking one? I'll get the walking.
TCS wide spotlight. Okay, I've got you.
Awesome.
Sorry, everyone. We've got 5 cameras set up, and I hit the wrong one.
So,
Oh, aren't they cute? They are darling. Should we take them up?
And can everyone else mute themselves, please? Thank you.
One.
Somebody's chit-chatting,
Two.
but that's okay.
Yes.
So You know, most people said that they're going to be doing a variety of these different events, which will give people the opportunity to go into people's studios and do all kinds of different things through the NSS. And unfortunately or fortunately, most people's studios are not 15,000 square feet. So we set up a bunch of cameras so that I could, you know, for when I teach the Zoom classes, we have different perspectives that try to get you the most accessibility to the information. But it also, the more cameras you have, the more likely it is to mess up. So in any case, so I'm going to show you just a couple different things. So when we talk about a mold like that, it's pretty straightforward. When we talk about a mold like this, and you may recognize that piece, it's a maquette for something that ended up on a New York City street. And we can go into the close-up now if you want. And even something like this has something called a window, right? So the rubber passes between the legs, and if that is not done in a two-part mold or a multi-part mold, then it would lock, right? Because you wouldn't be able to get it out. So in order to accommodate the piece, we built the mold in two halves, right? So that when you have that space that goes between the legs in here, the rubber touches the rubber there. Does that make sense to everybody?
Are you saying that's a two-part mold?
Yes, ma'am.
Yeah, and then the window, is there some special thing you want us to understand that's specific?
Well, it's just, it's not this one in particular, other than that it exists, right? So where the rubber comes in between, into a space that fills a window like that, you have to accommodate it by either creating a two-part mold with a shim. So you can either put something in there that prevents the rubber from going through, or you have to cut it because it's going to fill that center section, right? So,
yeah, thank you.
So it's really just about understanding your model. And now, not that I ever want this process to affect your level of creativity, but if the legs were together in this piece, much easier to mold, right? Now, if that would change the piece completely, right? The way it looks, the way it reads, and your intent. But when you start to make molds, what happens is it starts to affect the way that you make pieces in terms of understanding what's involved with casting, right? You want to make something, obviously, that's as easy on you as possible, but also the easier it is for whoever you're hiring to do it, from the mold maker to the foundry to any of these people, the less expensive it is. All right. When something is more complicated, you end up paying more money for it. It's just the nature of the beast. So understanding these processes in your pieces allows you to sort of figure out how you're going to make your work and how you have to assign those values to it, right? Because you want to make sure that that is the case. You want to make sure that you understand these things, and the monetarization of a piece is not related just to the clay, the armature, the tools you have to buy, the studio rent, the mold making process, the casting process, all of those things that go into a piece. You know, I think frequently people have no idea of really how to understand what their real costs are. And you know, I teach a class to a variety of universities, which is art and business. And it's usually to graduate students, and we talk about all these things. And as a graduate student, most people are a little idealistic, but the reality is that the understanding of how to make art viable as your business is truly important. Now, some people view people who do that as sellouts or things like that. But if you still stay true to your creativity and you can make a living at it, how awesome is that? I mean, really, you know, so understanding the money side of it is an important part of what I tend to teach in terms of people's preparation for these things, you know, and things as simple as naming your piece. You know, we talk about this all the time. First of all, untitled, never name a piece untitled. Okay, it means you didn't have enough forethought about what your intent was to put a title on it. Number two, never name it Aunt Rosie unless you're selling it to Uncle Paul. Nobody wants to buy your Aunt Rosie. Okay, if it's a beautiful piece of a woman with a cane and she's sitting on a park bench, that's solitude or wanting or something, but it's not your Aunt Rosie. I'm sorry, I digress. But these are the kinds of things that as sculptors, nobody prepares you for that stuff. You take classes on anatomy and you take classes on clay and you take classes on stone. And you know, that part of it is super important. And it's one reason actually that galleries exist, right? And you know, the other part of this, and this is not a gallery push, I do not have a gallery, but gallerists do something really important. They sell your work, you know? And when they say they're gonna take 50%, you want more, make your piece more expensive. You know, let them, they get a fee for doing that job so you don't have to. You know, the worst salespeople of their art is typically the artist. You know, first of all, you're emotionally attached to it. Right? If somebody comes in and says to you it matches their couch, take the check. Right? You don't care if it means what it meant to you. You want to know what it means to them, and each piece of work is supposed to speak to them individually. I mean, what's the purpose of art in the first place? It's to affect the surroundings. You know, one of the best parts about art, and I teach this to the graduate students, I say, you know, pick out, obviously present company excluded, pick out an artist you like, somebody who makes good art. Can you name any? Everybody's got somebody in their head, right? Now think about the person that makes the art that you hate, something you do not like, somebody who makes bad art. What about commercial art? Public art, crafty art. You know what's cool about all those things? They're all art. Something that makes you want to retch is just as effective as a piece of art as something that makes you want to smile or cry. You know, something that you find beauty in has affected you. Something that you find distasteful has affected you. That person got across. You know, I just feel like that's the beauty of the sculpture. You know, that it's that you create for yourself and then hopefully can make a living at it. But you know, that comes from you. And it's not about, it's, you know, in some circumstances it's about skill, but it's really about intent. And I like to think of myself as a facilitator on a very base level, from the materials themselves all the way out until, you know, conversations like this. And by the way, if you want to have a Zoom conversation with me privately, I am happy to do that. You can either send cash or scotch, and we can sit and have a Zoom meeting. You can have your scotch there, I'll have my scotch here. But I do actually do consultation, but I'm happy to have any chats anybody would like. You can always reach us through me through the company. I am here, obviously, entirely too often. So, how are we doing on time, Gwen? I get wrapped up and forget.
Yeah, it's 6:20. So yeah, we're well into it.
Okay, that's good.
And
I just,
if you want, at some point, I can put it in. Just change the view, and people can unmute themselves, and just put it in gallery view.
Sure. I mean, whatever people would like. I'm here to amuse you guys. So what I'll do now is I think we have. I'm going to see if we have enough battery in the walking camera to go back through, and I can keep doing that. All right. Let's see. Hang on. All right. So
I have a question. I have a question.
Yes. First of all, your name.
I'm sorry?
Your name?
Paula Stern.
Hi, Paula. How are you?
So my question is about the rubber mold. I assume that's a rubber mold back there.
The one we were looking at? Yeah.
Yeah. How long do these molds last? And what do you recommend? I'm finding that, some of my molds are deteriorating, or might not, hold up long enough to make more than make at the most one more piece.
Well, so different kinds of materials are available to make molds, right? So
Right.
there's polyurethane rubber, there's polysulfide rubber, there's latex rubber, there's silicone rubber, and they each have different lifespans that are categorized by their tech sheet, if you will, right? But in addition to that, the storage of the mold plays a big part in it. And some materials work better in certain environments than others, and some materials last longer. So latex molds are actually the lowest on the library life scale, because they're kind of like rubber band material, right? So if you keep your rubber band around for a really long time, it gets brittle and eventually starts to crack. So latex is not the best in terms of library life. The polyurethanes, so originally when they came out with polyurethanes, there was a product called 724, which was primarily used in the jewelry industry, but it's a polyurethane rubber that starts to degrade after 3 or 4 years, and it actually reliquefies. And it was very, very popular in the 80s and 90s. And then towards the end of the 90s, a lot of these molds were liquefying in the foundry back rooms. Interestingly enough, at altitude, it lasts a lot longer. So the people in Colorado were using this material, and it was lasting 10 years. So a lot of these things are interesting little bits of information that are about each of the different materials. The typical library life that is acceptable by a manufacturer for the molds of silicone is typically 5 to 10 years. Polysulfides, they say, are 20 to 30 years, but almost nobody uses polysulfides anymore because you can't cast resin into them. So unless you were using them just for the foundry, then it was no longer a popular rubber. They're great for wax, they're good for plasters and things like that, but you can't cast resin because there's sulfur in the rubber. So that was inhibiting the casting material. So people who wanted to be able to cast in resin, obviously were now using primarily silicones. The other thing about the silicones is that they're non-toxic. So now all of a sudden you have something in your studio that you can use that's not a danger to you. Now the resins themselves are, but at least the silicone is not. So there's no singular answer to pretty much any question you're ever going to ask me, but I'll try and give you as much information as possible. And also, not that I'm pushing the classes, but on the 28th, I teach an introduction to mold making class. So if you're interested, you can look on our website, and it's basically an overview of all the materials and the different types of processes and the materials that are available. So.
Thank you.
Sure. Are you casting resin into it?
Sometimes that's the other thing. Some of these molds, were made for bronze purposes, but then I would like to be able to use them for resin positive. Sure. And I gather, I'm not certain if they're interchangeable.
Well, it depends on the material. So if they're black toughy, no. If they're black rubbers, then they're probably not interchangeable. But you can cast plaster or cement or things like aqua resin, which is like a polymer gypsum, into it. Those will go into polysulfides. You just can't use polyester, polyurethane, or epoxies.
Thank you very much.
Sure. And then on the mold storage issue that we were talking about, one of the things, the thing about mold storage is obviously temperature, right? You want to make sure that everything is sort of midline in terms of temperature, not too hot, not too cold. And it also depends on your mother mold. So if you have a mother mold that's made out of plaster and you get it too cold, sometimes what happens is the moisture in it actually freezes, and plaster may distort. But in terms of the actual storage of the molds, you want to make sure that the pieces either are closed and fit together properly. And then typically what I'll do is I'll pour a wax in and I'll leave a wax in it, because the wax seals the inside of the mold from being exposed. And then you can just demold that wax and then use the rubber. And that works really well for silicones. I tend not to use gypsum for casting into it or cement to keep the masters, because the the gypsums and the cementitious materials are high alkali, so they eat the surface of the mold a lot. But the gypsums, because they dehydrate, tend to shrink or expand a little bit in the process of curing, and you don't want that to be in your mold for storage.
Is there something other than, I mean, I suppose it's best to keep them covered just for cleanliness, but
Well, yeah.
I thought about putting an actual positive in there, like a wax, or just maybe just keep another resin in there.
Well, yeah, you could leave a resin in there too. That's fine also. The problem with the resins is that sometimes over time, because you use a silicone release, the material can stick a little bit. I tend not to use anything that's catalytic for mold storage. The best thing is actually the wax copy.
Right.
And if you want it solid, you can do wax, and then you can do plaster behind it if you wanted to keep it, stronger. But the wax should be sufficient.
Yes.
Keeping it covered is always a good idea. UV degradation of any of these materials is always a factor. So cool, dark place, just keep them with your bats.
So you just answered Charlotte's question, which is, does light affect mold storage?
Oh, yeah. So light affects pretty much everything. It oxidizes us. Sometimes we look better with it. I have this pasty New York tan. This is tan in New York, just so you know. But UV, and here's the thing about all this, and this is going to juxtapose me into another conversation, which we can go down that trail or not. But the environmental caustic nature of what's out there now is been increased well, how do I put this best? In the last 50 years, the environment's become more caustic than it was in the 500 before it. So the introduction of pollutants and the degradation of the ozone layer and the change in temperatures have all appreciated the amount of acid rain and the winds and things like that, and the oxidation that's taking place, and the UV exposure that affects all outdoor sculpture in addition to that. So I deal with a lot of restorative artists, and when we talk, marble used to be perfect outside. You had it outside in Greece and Italy for hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of years. And now in the last 50 years, they've seen more degradation of any exterior sculpture, especially in marble, because calcium carbonate is particularly susceptible to acid rain. Bronzes, changing patinas, steel pieces rusting, and a lot of the lacquers that exist, some of them are very tough and work really well, but as soon as you have one chink in the armor, the breakdown starts immediately. So, in terms of environmental characteristics and storing molds, indoors, out of the elements, absolutely. And that's it. I saw somebody had a question about the stone piece that we did.
Yeah, Gwen Market.
Gwen, so that's a polyester resin with marble powder and porcelain powder. And then we did, I could tell you how I got it to look antique, but I'd have to kill you, all of you. No, in any case, what I actually did was I took dirt and I poured coffee and tea into it, and then I stuck the head in it for about 3 weeks, and I left it in there, and then I pulled it out and just dusted it off, and that's what gives it that antique finish.
Trade
So
secret.
there's no actual pigment in it. And the only reason that the stain works on the resin is because of the filler that's in it, because the marble powder that's in it and the porcelain powder that's in it are porous. So that's what absorbed it, not the resin. If it's straight resin, you have to paint it.
You mentioned porcelain powder. Was that fired like ROG or raw clay?
So no, it's ground up fired clay.
Okay.
Yeah.
Essentially
But
grog.
you could use regular ones as well. I mean, you could use unfired clay as well if it were powdered enough. It becomes like plaster, you know. So what I'm going to do now, Gwen, if you want to find the walking one, I think we have enough battery. I'm going to keep walking around.
Okay, I also wanted to throw one more question at you from Donna, wondering
Sure.
if you carry bronze for cold casting.
Sure. So we have for cold casting, and I was going to, you know, so let's leave it on wide for a minute, and I'll show you something. I did a piece. Of course, I put it somewhere. Oh, okay. So I did a piece that I wanted to show you, because I know everybody always asks about bronze casting. So, and this was a brush-on mold. Oh, I might as well be right. With a plaster bandage mother mold. Now, one of the things you'll notice about the piece, you can see the shape there. You see how it's uneven? So
Yes.
when I build my mother molds, I always build them so they're flat. So I built up that section in there so that it fit right over the piece. Because otherwise, when you're pouring, right, you want it to be level when you're pouring. Just a little tip and trick, because your pieces are not flat. And if you can't do it in the mother mold, I'll show you another way in just a second. But this one I did. So this is, I don't know, somebody's eye, right? And you can see that's with bronze powder in it. And then what I'll do is, hang on one second. Okay, so what I'm going to do is just burnish this a little bit with some steel wool. Just so you can see. Can you see how much that comes up like real metal? Is that okay? I guess it's a little bit shiny, but so you can see the metallic piece come out of it. When it first comes out, it looks a little like brown plastic, but as you polish it, it looks like actual bronze. Can everybody see that clearly? Because on my screen, it's a little fuzzy.
I can.
Okay.
I'm having a hard time seeing that. And what, I mean, you're using a very fine not sandpaper,
Steel wool.
steel wool.
Yeah, depending on whether I'm going to patinate it or polish it, I use steel wool or bronze wool. Because if you're gonna patinate it and you use steel wool, sometimes you leave little bits of steel on it, and then if you put a patina on it, sometimes that'll rust. In addition to whatever patina you're getting, which can be kind of cool, but you should know that you're introducing steel to it. So then I'm going to show you right here. So can we get to the close-up camera, Gwen?
Do you want Mark Fields walking?
Nope, the other one. So I'm going to show you a bunch of different metals.
Okay, we've got you.
You got me? All right, hang on one second. Sorry. Okay. So what you're looking at here, can you see that? No, hang on.
Yes.
All right. Well, I want to make sure it's centered. Okay. So I'm gonna come around this side. So this is bonded copper. All right. This is a different copper. This one has a little bit more purple to it. I'm trying to figure out which way it goes. This is nickel silver. Brass. And just again, as you look at these pieces, right? Can you see how that cut came up on the bottom better? Iron. I'm sorry, iron. Stainless steel. So we have all of these metal powders, and then this one is aluminum. So, and the aluminum will really come up kind of shiny there.
So that's actually poured into the resin as
Right.
opposed
So
to
that's the
on
mold.
surface.
So, well, what I do is typically, because the metal powders are the expensive part of the casting, I mix a little bit of metal powder with the resin and brush that into the mold first. And then I mix less powder into the back and pour it. So that way, if you miss a spot, it doesn't show. But there's, yeah. But that way you have the metal powder in there only at the face level, because the only place you're going to see it is at the surface. Hang on one second, I'll show you. So you can stay on that one for a minute, and I'll show you exactly what I'm talking about. So this piece, let's see where we are. You know what? I'm gonna just shift this a little bit. Hang on one second. Don't get dizzy, guys. Is that better? Yeah, okay. So here, right, we've got this is that purpley copper. And as you start to clean it, when it comes out of the casting, can you see how bright that came out? Oh, sorry, hang on. Whoop. Down, this way. Got it. Sorry, that was me. But you can see how the polishing starts to come up over here. Now, when I show you the back, I don't know if you can see, it's hard to see, but let's see. Can you guys see into the piece there? Is there enough light? Maybe not. The metal, like the back of this one I poured, oh yeah, here. See there? So the metal powder is underneath it, right? There's resin behind it that has no metal powder. It's so hard to do some of this stuff on camera. I have more respect for the actors. But you can see that this part, so, you know, if you start to burnish the high points, the answer is yes. So there are a variety of different manufacturers, and one of the, can we go back to the TCS wide, Quinn?
Yep.
Okay. See, at least you guys get to see that I'm wearing pants. I'm not doing this pantsless.
And while we're doing that, Lisa had a question about the best clay for doing a life-size piece.
So is it a life-size piece you're going to try and fire, or is it a life-size piece that you're going to mold and cast?
Lisa, you can unmute yourself.
Me?
No, Lisa.
Oh, Lisa. Oh, can you switch back to TCS wide though?
Yeah, hang on, get it going
Okay.
there. I have to scroll through 68.
Huh?
Okay.
That's okay.
Can you hear me?
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
Okay.
Actually, if you have time to give me the answer to both those, that would be great. Your suggestions.
So,
for both.
well,
It's very difficult for me to drive. I have to drive pretty far to get to a big enough kiln to pay for it.
So if you're firing it, right, you're going to have to figure out that you can't use an armature in it.
Right.
So then what you do is you build it in sections that you would then put back together, or you're going to use the clay and you're going to build it up with a paper over just a paper armature, which you can then dig out afterwards. Mm-hmm. So as it gets to be leather hard, you'll have to take that out, put it back together. If you're gonna mold it, then you're gonna build yourself a nice strong armature. So for something life-size in clay, you want to have a base that's got either welded or bolted to it, and then the skeletal structure of the figure should be a welded steel or a pipe fittings, right? Because that way it gives you, you want to have at least a 1 1/4 inch pipe when you're doing it. Gives you enough strength to hold the weight of the clay, because the clay is going to be heavy on a life-size piece, whether it's plastiline or water-based clay. For water-based clays that are life-size, I like something with a little bit more grog to it, and because it gives the clay a thicker body that holds together better. And you want to put a lot of support structures into the piece that are like crossbars. Josh, can you give me the 24-inch head armature? Just the top. And so it's something that gives you enough physical reinforcement inside the piece to hold the clay body. But typically I use something that has a little bit more grog to it.
Okay.
For plastilines, now plastilines are a little bit different beasts. So now plastilines you're buying based on the room temperature hardness, because if you add heat to any of them, they'll go all the way to a liquefaction for the sulfur-free ones, which is primarily what you're going to use if you're doing mold making. So the Chavant Clayette, the NSP, the Monumel, the Roma Prima, any of those are going to be purchased based on the room temperature hardness. Because if you want to build something large, you need a firmer left. If you want to build something large, you're going to need a firmer body to hold its shape on the piece, even though you're applying it warm. So you would warm it up to put it on because it makes it softer. It's okay. She's fine. We have a cat in the store. When I go back to walking camera, I will humor her, but she would not allow us to participate without saying she wanted a cameo. So you can hear her in the background. I apologize. So when I was talking about physical forms, right, if you have an arm in the armature, then the pipe is the arm, and you can build out. Now, obviously, they wouldn't be this large because this is for shoulders. But if you have anything that's like this, that creates a physical layer for the clay to grab onto, it gives the piece much more strength. So it's really about designing your armature well, and then you can get away with a variety of different media for doing the actual finished piece. But typically, I do not recommend a soft clay, for a soft oil-based clay or plastilina for doing a life-size figure, because it tends to sag under its own weight.
Right, that's what I've used before, and that's what happens.
Yeah, so it's a little bit of a pain in the butt, because now if it's hard, when it's actually at room temperature, it means that manipulating the clay is a little bit more difficult without heat. So what you invest in is like a spotlight, with a reflector and a heat bulb, and you can warm specific areas, and you get, or a clay warming oven, and summarily, something like a crock pot, where you can literally keep it sort of just on a very low temperature, and you can scoop it out like peanut butter and apply it. But then when it cools, it'll get hard again. But it's going to change the way you do details. Did that help?
Yes, thank you so much.
Awesome. Was there one question I missed, or should we?
Yeah, actually, there's another question from Paul Foley, wondering if you mix metal powders with clear resin.
Sure.
Do you ever mix them? Do you ever combine those?
Absolutely, and that's usually what you want to do, because if you put it with an opaque resin, what happens is you lose some of the luster of the metal powder. So typically, when you're doing bonded metal castings, you want to do them with it doesn't have to be a water clear resin. So when it comes to clear resins, there's a series of different classifications. There's opaque, which comes in different colors. Could be white, could be tan, could be black, right, that they pre-make them. Then there's pigments you can put into them. Then they make something called transparent resins. And transparent resins are the ones you typically use for metal casting, because they have no coloration to them, but they have a little bit of an amber cast. So they're not water clear, but they're pretty clear, right? And you mix the metal powder into that, because then you can see the metal powder through it, and it delivers the color or the luster through that. I think you asked about Easy Flow 60 Clear. That's a great product. One of the advantages to working with us is that I am the only place in the world that has competing brands. So right now, I don't know if you know, but if you're a Smooth-On distributor, you can't be a Polytech distributor, you can't be a Dow distributor, can't be an Alumilite distributor. So we are the only place that has all of the different brands, because I started it so early that they all, they wanted to be in, and I work for you guys, not for them. Right. So when I want to choose a product, I want to choose the most appropriate product. I don't care who makes it. So Smooth-On makes a product called the Color Match series, which is Smooth Cast 325, 326, 327. There's Polytech makes Easy Flow 60 Clear. Then on top of that, there's also what they call clear resins. Clear resins are a different chemistry. They're aliphatic resins. They are significantly more toxic, but they are water clear. Polytech makes a product called Polyoptic. Crystal Clear is made by Smooth On. There's a product called Deep Pour, which is made by Alumilite. And all of those are clear, water clear resins. But again, they have to be used with care. You really need to use a respirator, excuse me, and to protect yourself, because all of the polyurethane resins, unlike the epoxies or polyesters, are also allergens. So you can develop a sensitivity to them even after using them for a fair bit of time. All of a sudden, you can have a reaction. You know, one of the things when it comes to safety, when we talk about these things, is that you need to really be aware of how you're working, right? So when you're working with something that you feel is ideal, or you feel off, you know, whether or not it's toxic, whether or not, you know, if somebody tells you it should be fine, pay attention to yourself. You know, understand what you're working in. Make sure you open a window. Make sure you have ventilation. Make sure if you don't feel comfortable with something that's not what you're using. You know, you got to protect yourself. And it's my job to keep you alive longer because you buy more stuff. So we're just going to do a quick walkthrough. Since we were talking about resins, I'm going to take you through the mold making and casting section. So, you know, one of the things about all of these materials is that they're chemicals. So you start to figure out that there are ancillary products. This is what we were talking about for the smooth cast color match. You can see it says color match series, and they make 3 different versions because they are a fast, a medium, and a slow. This is the easy flow clear you were talking about. And as you know, all the different materials that we have are here and just get pulled. You know, right now, like I said, we're working sort of like a warehouse, so everything is all over the place. But I just figured I'd take you for a quick walkthrough. Aqua resin is a great non-toxic resin replacement material. Winter stone, all of the different safety gear, and that's something else I'm going to tell you guys. You know, because we are suppliers for medical companies also, we always have a supply of safety gear if you guys need it, from gloves to respirators and things like that, face shields. You know, they kept us in an allocation, so we always had product if you guys need it. This is our release agent section, some of these things. Also, we do a lot in the special effects makeup. These are some pre-made molds, some different things. This is the special effects makeup area. So we deal with body paints and all kinds of things. Some very cool eyes. And then I'm going to take you for a quick walk through the balance of the store. So this is our patina section for metal. We stock Jax, Birchwood Casey, L&M, and Sculpt Nouveau. And so there's a wide variety of patinas that are available, as well as all of the metal cleaners, sealants, you know, exterior grade sealants, colored sealants. The raw chemicals, we stock all of the patina chemicals. This is our sort of metal section. So we have different types of materials for in plate or in rod, in mesh, all different kinds of things like that. Stainless steel balls, everybody should have one. Obviously, this is a good example of, let me see if I can back off on this. So can you guys see these columns? The one on the right is the piece right out of the mold. So that's a polyester column. And then we did a patina on it using a metal coating and a rust and green patina on it. Makes it look very antique, kind of cool. These are all different foams that we stock. So we stock styrofoam, blue board, HDU, which is high density urethane foam, in all different shapes and sizes. So you can sort of have a scope for what the store has. I'll try and hold you high. And I hope this has been entertaining. So I'm going to go back into my office. And if you guys have anything you'd like to see in particular, so we do a lot of movie work, sculpture, obviously, in different media. Most of these have been gifts from sculptors, hint, hint. So if you want to be in the museum, Don't look at, obviously some sculptures are in silicone.
Hey, Mark,
Yeah.
does your cat have a favorite place in the store?
Oh, where is Belly? Where's Belly? Does anybody know where Belly is? Huh? We'll go find Belly. She should have the highlight at the end anyway.
And we also had a question about the challenges and cost of shipping bulky things like rigid foam and heavy things like stone.
Well, so this is Belle. She's obviously allergic to Zoom meetings. Hey. She has the best eyes though. She is our store cat and she lives here. Yeah, I'll give you a quick, this is the fam. That's my daughter. Hello. My son, my future son-in-law, something like that. And the cat, she's in charge. So to answer your question, shipping is always a quandary. Can you close up that clay, Morgan? Basically, the way that I figured it out is that anything that is under 50 pounds can actually ship relatively reasonably. The majority of shipping companies have started to attach fees to units that are over 50 pounds. What we have done for pieces that, so you can ship via common carrier, anything up to 140 pounds. But then let me just do this, hang on. Is that okay? So up to 140 pounds. Then anything over that, so pieces of stone that are 150 pounds plus, or large pieces of foam, things like that, they have to go by truck. And we do have facilities to set all of that up and do the shipping, but unfortunately shipping costs are just what they are.
Mark, I have a question from Donna asking just what seems to be the trend of sculpture materials these days? Do you notice a difference from 25 years ago?
Well, so interestingly enough, no. You know, sculptors are, the thing that's happened is that more materials are readily available as opposed to changing what they were. Sculptors are notorious scroungers, right? And before this, you sculpted whatever you could, because as I tried to explain my perspective as a sculptor is they have to sculpt. Doesn't matter what they're sculpting in, they have to do it. So if they have to do it, they're going to find something, they're going to use it, whether it's soap or stone or wood or clay or, you know, kids materials, whatever it is. But the trend has been, obviously, most recently, it's been towards materials that are non-toxic, because everybody's trying to be healthier. You know, I mean, I remember the good old days when smoking was a digestive aid, but you know, we're beyond that now. So I'm hoping that you know, people try to stay safe, but really it's about using things in a safe manner. So there's no real change in materials. I mean, there's some newer fangled materials, you know, a lot more people are casting in silicone now because it's become much more affordable. So the reborn doll industry has been exploding, especially since everybody's been home. We sell a lot of silicone into that industry. I'm sorry, I should be doing it this way. I apologize. Can you, huh? Yeah, can you hold it? So that's the, that's one of the industries that sort of changed. But you know, classical materials are still the thing. It was funny because when we were talking about what to go over in this event, I said, you know, what's really interesting about it is that people still carve stone, people still carve wood, people still work with clay. You know, it's the old materials that are still great. There are epoxy clays now, and those are newer in terms of the clay family. But basically, you know, it's just an adaptation of something that has existed through all this time. So did anybody have any other questions?
Just Paul asked, do you know anything about 3D and printing in metal, large metal pieces?
So there is the capacity to print in clay, in metal, in plastics. There are a variety of different materials out there that you can use, and there are companies that specialize in that. It's like a foundry, right? So it's a bit, and for the metal, it's a particular type of machine that 3D prints in it. It has to be heated as it does it. So there are a couple of companies that are proprietary in that, but most people are not. It's not a very common thing yet.
Okay.
Thermoplastics, and there was a product that you used on a t-shirt, a cotton t-shirt, to make it solidified and hard. What was that product?
It's a textile hardener, and it's called PowerTex. Can you
Thank
just
you much.
turn that one up? You're very welcome. And if you're on our website, one of the cool things that's hard to find, so with 62,000 items, unfortunately, what happens is that I get a lot of people lost in the website, and I'm trying to reorganize it better. And if you guys ever have any suggestions about how to do that, I'm all ears too. Like if you want different categories or things, please drop me a note. I would love to hear that. But at the end of the big menu, there's a word that says brands, which is literally has every product from a particular brand. So if you go to PowerTex in there, it'll bring up all the PowerTex products. Same thing holds for like Magic Sculpt or Rockite or Sculpt Nouveau. And if you're looking for a particular product from one of those companies, you can find them in that section too.
Thank you so very much. This has been great, and you've been very informative. I appreciate it.
Oh, it's my pleasure. Thank you so much for spending your Saturday night with me.
Thank you so much. It was just very, very generous of you to spend this time with us, and very informative.
Oh, thank you, Paula.
Yeah.
I'm going to put it in gallery view so everyone, we've lost some people. They've been signing off and saying thank you, but we've still got 35 on the screen. So.
Well, if you have more questions, I'm here. I mean,
Mark, Kathy Farrell, wonderful fun. Thank you.
Yeah.
Learned a lot.
Oh, my pleasure. Thank you.
Thank you, Mark, and thanks to the entire team, Morgan, Josh, and Alex, who helped.
Thank you.
Well done.
With all the cameras, all the camera people.
Yeah.
And if anyone does think of any further questions, you know how to reach Mark, and you know how to reach us. So please reach out. We always love hearing from you, and stay in touch.
By all means, and I'm happy to help as well in any way I can.
Bye-bye.
Thank you. Good night. Hope to see you all next month. We're doing another Connections. We'll be visiting Sabin Howard's studio and seeing how the World War I memorial is coming along.
I'm definitely signing into that one for plucky comic relief.
Yeah.
Thanks, Gwen.
Thank you. Thanks, everyone. Have a great rest of the weekend.
You
too. Bye.